Hi guys, Deanne here from Canada Abroad, and thanks so much for tuning in. Today we're bringing you the latest update in regards to the Parent and Grandparent Sponsorship Program. Now, as some of you know, this is where if you're a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen and you meet certain financial requirements, you can apply to sponsor your parents or your grandparents for Canadian permanent residency. What happened back in 2020 was sponsors were requested during a very specific period to go online and complete an interest to sponsor form. Once they completed that form, they were then eligible to be selected, lottery style, to sponsor their parents and grandparents for that year's quota. What happened last year was they used that same pool of applicants that completed these forms in 2020 and selected people for that year's quota using the 2020 pool. What they have announced earlier this week is they are still going to be using the 2020 pool of applicants who wanted to sponsor their parents or grandparents. Now, what this means is that unless you completed that interest to sponsor form in 2020, you will not be able to be selected to sponsor your parents and grandparents this year. They are not going to be taking in any new interest to sponsor forms. So unless you completed that form back in 2020, you will not be able to be picked this year to sponsor your parents and grandparents. What they've said is that when they created that pool of interested sponsors back in 2020, it was such a large pool that they still have over 155,000 sponsors sitting in that pool who were not chosen to sponsor their parents or grandparents. So what they're going to be doing over the next 2 weeks is they will be inviting 23,100 sponsors from that pre-existing pool to sponsor their parents or grandparents. So what they've said is that when you applied back in 2020, keep checking the email address that you used on that application, as over the next 2 weeks, you may receive an email inviting you to sponsor your parents or grandparents. Now, it's important that if you do receive this invitation, you have to check that you still meet the eligibility criteria to sponsor, because if your income no longer meets the threshold, or if any other documentation is missing, or you no longer meet other certain sponsor criteria, you won't be able to proceed with the application. So make sure that you go in and check that email address. And if you are lucky enough to receive one of those invitations, you check the criteria and confirm that you are eligible. And then you can proceed with the application to sponsor your parents or grandparents. And anybody who did not complete one of these forms back in 2020, unfortunately, you are going to have to continue to wait at least until 2023 before you will be eligible to give in your interest to sponsor. So very important, there will not be any new intakes of sponsors this year. They are going to be picking from the pre-existing pool that was created back in 2020. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with all the latest Canadian immigration news and updates.